Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you're here to join us. As folks are coming in, I'll just briefly introduce our speakers this afternoon. I'm Jen Carson, and welcome to Preparing Students for Speaking and Writing Proficiency-Based Tests. I work at LTI as a proficiency and learning specialist, and I am absolutely delighted to introduce you to two fabulous presenters today. Jessie Creech and Allison Price are nationally board certified Spanish teachers at Mountain Brook High School in Birmingham, Alabama. They will share with you some strategies they use to prepare their learners for success on the Apple. So please join me in welcoming Jessie and Allison.
Hi, everyone. If you would tell us where your name and where you're from, if you'd let us know in the chat so we can get an idea of who's here and what area of the country you represent, that would be great. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. I don't want to make anybody jealous, but it's 80 degrees outside and we are enjoying beautiful weather. So spring is coming. It's arrived in some places, but it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
I am the AP Spanish teacher at Mountain Brook High School. I have taught lower levels in the past. And this is Allison Price, my colleague and partner in crime.
Yes. And I teach advanced 4 that goes into AP and regular 4 and seniors and level 5. But I've also taught lower levels. Yes.
And we have been administering the Apple at our school for the past 10 years. We have considered other proficiency-based tests, but we have decided as a department, all the language teachers, that at Apple fits our needs best. And we will focus in this presentation on preparing upper level students rather than students in Spanish 1 or 2. We will also include some examples from Spanish 3, but most of our presentation will be focused on our level 4 students. And we decided to start our presentation with, thanks to Jen, with our updated ACTFL rating scale. And we decided to start here because this is what guides our instruction. Many of our students are at the intermediate level when they get to us, but whether that's intermediate low or intermediate mid depends on the student. It's all based on their exposure, their life experiences, their dedication to the class. A lot of different factors play into this. And our goal is always to move them up the pyramid. We wherever our students are, we want to see them grow. And we have developed a pretty structured way of meeting their needs wherever they are. And we do this through a sequence, through steps that we will share with you today. So first, we will start with a process that we use for improving writing proficiency. And we have, what we like to do is we like to choose a context. We like to choose a particular reading or something to give students the resources they need. So Jen, if you could go to the next one, we would, here we look at what new vocabulary the students might need. Can we incorporate other transitions? How complex is the text? Is it going to be interesting to them? That's something else that we try to address. And students practice in that specific context with the new resources. And then we assess students' performance in speaking or writing in that content. So we try to incorporate elements of spontaneous communication because based on the different variables in the context. And we'll show you what that looks like in a minute. And then, of course, we give students feedback on their performance, and that helps guide our selection of the next text to keep leveling up, to keep working with students and pushing them. So the context is usually a novel or a text students read that contains different tenses and multiple paragraphs. Of course, it's best if it includes resources like vocabulary and transitions, and we use it as a model for students to replicate in their own writing. So we will point out to them different structures in the novels that we use, or in the texts. In my case, in AP, I will point out different transitions that students can use, for example, that are beyond primeros, first, second, third. I try to discourage that and encourage more sophisticated vocabulary and transitions. And the readings help us do that. So to practice, students write one of several prompts and receive formative feedback. We like to give them different prompts, and the prompts vary in task and in specific vocabulary and transitions required. And students are required to write multiple paragraphs. And we like to do this. We like to vary the prompts so that the whole class isn't writing the same thing, so that students can go from practice. So the prompt, of course, will be different. The prompts will be different in practice than they are in the assessment, in the formative assessment at the end. But these are, it's important to us that they get the specific vocabulary and transitions that we want them to use. So the assessment part is they take one of the prompts and they write one of the paragraphs written in practice. These prompts have different sets of vocabulary and transitions than the practice prompts. Like I said, we don't repeat. So the assessment is different from the ones that we use in practice, but they're structured the same. And they're from the same pool of vocabulary and transitions that we've shared with them. We'll go to the next one. So here's an example. We use Vida y Muerte en la Mara Salvatrucha, and we use that novel, and we came up a long time ago with a list of vocabulary and transitions that we want students to use. And that's the context, and those are the resources that we use for to start students with. And it will. So go ahead.
So yes, so this is our example. So the first example is from the novel that our level 4 students read. And you can really do this with any text. So we want to make sure everyone knows that with any text, with any novel, with anything that students already are reading. So we get to the point in the book where it's kind of a cliffhanger, where one character kind of gives the other character an ultimatum. So, and we make them stop there and then write a letter as one of the characters to another. And then they have to use specific vocabulary words and transitions from the list that we've given them and we've already seen in the example. So the novel has been an input. It's been input for them for the vocabulary words and the transitions. And then we try to get them to write in paragraph length because that's important for their proficiency, that they can show that they can write in extended connected sentences. So we tell them what ideas to include in the introduction and the body and the conclusion, and the ideas stay the same, but the ideas that they have to include stay the same, but since they're different characters, the things that they write, because of the character's point of view, changes what they say. And they have to use different tenses, which is another thing that we're trying to get them to do accurately, to perform in a way that shows that their proficiency has improved. So I think on the example is write a response to one of the prompts without using any resources. So like Jesse was saying, with the practices, they can use their vocabulary lists, but then in this example, you see this as a test. and students had to circle the vocabulary words that are listed there as they use them. So you can see that she did that within the writing, and then they had to put a box around the transitions that were used. And then under that, it says that to use different tenses, use past tense and present tense to write a letter, pretend that you're anonimo, so that's the narrator, writing to Analia, who was his girlfriend, telling about your decision of the two demands from your brother Pedro. And then the introduction, the student had to include, explain why Analia is a person that's important to you, and summarize your the confrontation, like what happened in the book right before we made them stop reading. And then the body, explain the demands that Pedro had and reasons why you're going to or not going to follow them, because we didn't know what was going to happen in the book. And then so they kind of had to guess what the character was going to do, which kind of helped them buy in more to it. And they could prove that they were paying attention to the motives of the characters that we have read so far. And then in the conclusion, tell what you hope for the future and ask a question. So you can.
And I want to add here that there's also engagement in this piece, because prior to this, when we read the book in class, we've acted out scenes. We have talked about character motivation, all in the target language, and so students are coming to this already with some ideas about how they feel about the characters, and that the fact that they have ideas about how they feel about these characters, that these characters are something that they care about, that they can write from this point of view, adds to their desire to communicate. So choosing an engaging text, I think, is also important to help them buy into this process.
Yes. And so Jessie mentioned how they've had time to develop their ideas before this moment. It wasn't just like, here's a test, pretend to be the characters. Another thing that they've done before this time is they've really spent time analyzing preterite and imperfect within the text and why. What did he mean? Like you can see she wrote El agarró a mí, which is not like perfectly syntax. It's not perfect, but the fact that she used agarró, that it's preterite, that he did it one time, that's something we're still trying to work on in regular 4. So they've kind of gone through the text and thought about why is this why is it preterite? It's a one-time thing. So that we really see that come together when they write on their own in this text.
And we see their ideas and how they've processed those ideas in this text. Later on in the year, we use another text, if we could go to the next one, we use another text of like La Llorona, the weeping woman. We use this one, and again, we come up with vocabulary that they're going to need, a longer list of transitions. We want something more sophisticated from this after this reading. And the students practice with a retelling of the story in their own words, using specific vocab and transitions. And again, they will, we don't have it on this slide, but they will have to use the past tense in order to retell the story. They will have to include a beginning, a middle, and an end when they write. And we've noticed that that's something that students struggle with, that they, when you ask them to tell you a story about what they did on their birthday, they'll say, I went to eat with my parents and it was fun. And that's it. They won't go into any detail. And practicing these retelling of this story helps them add details to their writing and hopefully to their speaking later on. And finally, on the test, they write the story without the resources and with a different set of vocab words and transitions. So it's essentially what we did with example number 1. We repeat the process with a different text, with different vocabulary, with emphasis on different transitions. And this is an example of that. And we added idiomatic expressions to this assessment. And but the rest, we encourage them to use the vocab and the transitions, and then we incorporated the grammar here with the subjunctive. We ask them to use subjunctive, whether present or subjunctive or imperfect subjunctive. It's whatever they felt comfortable doing. Our focus, though, was more on the retelling itself, the use of transitions, and the use of the past tense, the variety of tenses.
Yes, and another thing about this writing, I couldn't get a sample that was that could fit on a slide, but this is one of the longest writings they do in this class. So this is just looks like part of the body of the story and part of the ending of the story, but it's much longer than this. And one of the things we're really trying to get them to do here is use more than one clause, which seems to be an element that's also really important for students to be able to do to increase their proficiency. And because of the nature of the complexity of the story, it becomes natural to do that in this story. Yeah.
So choosing the right text helps a lot, and choosing a text where students can engage. One of the things, this is not part of the this is not strictly part of the process, but I dress up as La Llorona when we're reading La Llorona, and I roam the halls dressed in white, calling for my children. So we try to get the students involved in other ways.
Yes. And so these strategies that we've used for writing, many of those we also use for speaking, but the difference is there's just not the same type of input for speaking. So, you, the teacher, are providing that, or I am, Jesse is, more than us looking for a text. But we still are trying to get students to do the same things, which use more than one clause, show that they understand the question that they've been asked, to try to use different vocabulary words. That can be a big struggle, so that especially once we get to the higher levels, they don't want to learn new words because they feel like they already know how to say that, and they're going to use the word they learned in Spanish 1. So it's so trying to get them to use synonyms for those things. Yep, and the different tenses is something we're trying to work on. So if you can, Jen, if you can go to the next slide, please. So our process, when we're preparing students for the proficiency-based tests, they have to answer questions about themselves, which, by the way, that has been really good with that first Vida y Muerte, where they pretend to be the character. They're using the yo form in that. So that we've seen kind of, that has helped them internalize that more, even though they're saying different ideas in in the proficiency-based tests. So in one method that we use is that we ask the students questions about themselves, and they're put in pairs, and one person is listening to the other answer the question. But before we do that, these are kind of backwards. The teacher models the answers that are organized and answers the prompt completely. So I'll ask a question, and then I'll answer it, and then I'll ask students, okay, what was the beginning of my story? What was the middle? What was the end of my story, to prove that, and to model, once again, this is the input, this is how I tell a complete story. Or if I have to answer a question that has a bunch of ideas, see all the different vocabulary words I use, see the ideas that I came up with. So that's kind of our goal. And we kind of work through that through the year in level 4, so that by April or so, by February, March, April, they're able to sustain an answer. So we start with a visual. Go ahead.
They carry so one of the things that we give them earlier in the year is a list of rejoinders. And some of them they're familiar with, like they know how to say how interesting, or how fun, or they might come to the class with that vocabulary, with those phrases, but we want them to practice using them so that their exchanges sound more interesting or more natural, and so that they have something to hold on to when they start talking that'll give them confidence.
Yes. So you're going to hear some of the rejoinders in an audio sample we have from students that goes with this graphic. So this is the first week of school, like the first couple of days of school. We ask students to create a map of their lives, and it focuses on the preterite past tense because they're one-time events. And so we try to help, them internalize this use of the past tense. And you can see this example. Gracia has written the years, and then she has a picture from her life, and then she's written the fewest amount of words possible to explain what's happening in the picture, which seems contrary to what we're trying to do because we are trying to get them to use details. But we don't want her to write, I don't want her to write them down, because you'll see in the conversation, her partner is gonna ask questions. So we're practicing the ability to ask questions. So they're gonna look at the visual together, and the partner is gonna say, like, I saw that you went to the girl will say, I went to the beach. And the partner could say, how cool. So using a rejoinder, who went to the beach with you? And so then she would answer. So, and then they do that for about a minute. But in that way, she's adding the details that her partner is asking. And it's just really a good starting point for building their more than one clause, their ability to create more than one clause, and to like focus on the details that they could add.
And they have this in their hand, so it's like a prop that they have, and it makes them feel more comfortable at the beginning of the year.
Yeah. So this is our structure then, is that at the beginning of the year, this is before we ask them personal questions, the slide that was earlier. They would use a visual, they're going to create it about themselves. The student who listens asks a question about what they hear, and the students have to use the present tense and the past. So they just kind of use either one. Sometimes I think you're going to hear in the example, the person asks what the dog's name is. So that's the dog still is living. So they use present tense. So it's good that they get used to the idea of using the tense that's needed. Yeah. So
they will want to use the present tense, but we encourage them to use the past tense.
And it helps that the past tense is written down. So that kind of gets them used to seeing it. So in this example, you're going to hear two students talk. And then for those that don't speak Spanish, I'll kind of highlight the ideas that they said. I think it's about a minute long.
En 2025, yo recibí mi perro.
¡Qué interesante! ¿Cómo se llamaba su perro?
Mi perro se llama Pearl.
¡Qué chido! ¿Qué más hiciste?
En 2024, yo recibí mi coche.
¿En serio? ¿Qué es el tipo del coche?
Mi coche es un Audi.
¿De veras? ¿Qué más hiciste?
En 2015 yo jugué los deportes.
¿Qué equipo jugaste?
Yo jugué para un equipo de básquetbol.
Me encanta.
Okay. So you could hear the rejoinders. It was how interesting, how cool, seriously, really? And I love it. So those were the ones that he used that were varied. So that was, we tell the students they need to try to use a different rejoinder each time they answer. So all of his made sense, which were really good. And her pronunciation was not perfect, and he used the wrong tense once. But overall, there was an exchange that made sense, and it was spontaneous in that the boy that was asking questions, he didn't have his questions written down anywhere. The girl was reading her events from her life, and so then they're going to switch roles so that she'll ask him questions and he will be reading. So it's kind of a getting comfortable with not having everything written down and reading from it. Yeah.
And I want to add to that, this isn't the first time they have practiced. They have not practiced perhaps with this partner. We spend a couple of days practicing with their map, but they work with different partners each time, and they don't know who they're going to get paired up with on the day of the assessment.
And the practices are fun because they get to talk to all the students in the class about themselves, and they are forced to ask questions about, and you get to, so I really feel like they enjoy this activity, especially at the beginning of the year where they may not know each other as well. So that by the time they're, like Jesse said, the variables this time are you don't know exactly what the person's going to ask you about your event, and you don't know who your partner is going to be, but they've practiced before. So then as we move along, we take away the visuals. So, and we do practice. We practice with the different possibilities of questions they could have.
And we let them use, like they can have their transitions in front of them, or they can have their rejoinders in front of them at the beginning, but then we take those away.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we have a sample from November of this year. And this is one where I've asked a question and the student has answered the question. Normally, I repeat the question twice, and then everyone answers their own question in a recording. So this would be the assessment. Like Jesse had said beforehand, students have practiced different questions, and this November recording was a question that they had heard before, because they're practicing answering the question, using different tenses if it's necessary, different vocabulary words. They're trying to use more than one clause. These are all the things that their partners have kind of marked off in the practices, like, are you doing these things or not? And they've heard examples of it.
Los norteamericanos en general no tienen un estilo de vida muy saludable, con la comida que comen y la vida ocupada. ¿Cómo mantienes buena salud? ¿Prefieres comer sano? ¿Haces mucho ejercicio? ¿Qué problemas de salud existen en tu comunidad o en tu familia?
Yo mantengo buena salud para levantar pesas y corro mucho, y me gusta como saludable y hacer mucho ejercicio en mi vida, porque yo tiene me gusta juego deportes y otras actividades, y en mi comunidad un problema de salud es que comida rápido, porque es muy mal para su salud, y muchas personas van a comprar comida rápido en sus vidas, pero sin embargo no es salud por tú.
Okay, so I chose this example. The question was, I try to give them a context before I just ask the question. I've especially noticed that this year, if I just come at them with a question that's a different topic, they're like, whoa, what? Like, it takes them time to come with me to that idea. So the first sentence was, Americans don't have a healthy lifestyle with the food they eat in their busy lives. How do you maintain good health? Do you prefer to eat healthy foods? Do you exercise? What health problems exist in your community or in your family? And I chose this sample because the student's grammar was not perfect. And he stuttered some, but he communicated many ideas, and his vocabulary, he talked about lifting weights, running, eating healthy, doing exercise, playing sports, activities in the community. And then the problems were fast food, and I think fast food was it. So I chose it because of the vocabulary and the more than one clause. It just was a great start, the amount that he said, because we find that students, when we focused a lot on grammar and it being perfect, they wouldn't want to say very much. And so that's really changed once we have focused on their ideas. Yeah. Okay. So this is our example from November. And this is the same student, but a different question. This question was more complex. And this one was a story. Yeah.
Para tener éxito en el mundo verdadero, todos necesitan una habilidad para saber cómo superar desafíos. Cuéntame sobre la última vez que tuviste que enfrentar una situación estresante. Describe la situación y cómo te preparabas. ¿Cómo terminó? Explica toda la historia.
Una tiempo que yo tengo una experiencia de estrés es cuando yo tenía una examen el próximo día y no reconocer que tengo. Estuve en mi casa con mis padres y mi hermana mayor y hacía buen tiempo, pero yo reconocí que tenía un examen de historia el próximo día. Yo inmediatamente corrí a mi cuarto y estudiar mucho en la 11 de la noche y estaba nervioso y tenía mucho estrés cuando yo estudié. Pero cuando yo levanté el próximo día, yo tocar el examen y saqué una E en el examen y me dio a mis padres que yo hacía bien y ellos me tomaban a una restaurante muy rica.
Okay. So the Rika, they always get that confused. So the question was, to have success in the real world, everyone needs to have the ability to know how to overcome stressful situations. Tell me about the last time you had to confront a stressful situation, describe the situation and how you prepared, how did it end, and explain the entire story. So he really did well telling the ideas that we had been focusing on in the format of the story. So we talked a lot. And this is where, I asked them, he had never heard this question before, unlike the question from November. So this was a completely new question. And I said the question twice, and he had to come up with a stressful situation and tell it without writing anything down. He did not have anything in front of him. So we had been practicing the ideas that students need to say to begin the story, which is setting the scene, like where, when, with whom you are. We said whether, if it makes sense. So you can tell he added that in there.
Mm-hmm.
Not really sure it made sense, but but these are the ideas, they are the details in the story, and that set the scene. As a person who's trying to listen and understand, these are the things we need to know so that the story makes sense. And then in the middle of the story, we talked about trying to do preterite activities, so things that happen one time. And so he tried, sometimes he used infinitives, but he corrected himself and said, I studied, and then I got up the next day. He said those in the preterite. I made an A. Some of the others probably should have been in the preterite, but he's working towards that with all the other things he was trying to remember. And then the other big thing that we're trying to get students to do is finish the story. So many times they just want to say, fue divertido. It was fun. And that was it. But this story was not fun. So he could not say that. And he said that he told his parents, and they took him to a restaurant. I guess he means like an expensive restaurant, a restaurante caro, a lujoso, or something like that. I chose this one because of all the ideas he said, and we'd been working so much on the format of a story. And so really, to be able to do this with students, we come up with so many different questions about so many different topics, and they listen to different partners answering different questions. And that also sometimes helps them come up with ideas if they can hear other students doing it. Yes.
And sorry, Allison.
No, go ahead.
AI has been wonderful in coming and helping us come up with prompts for them to speak. I'll just go into, we use Magic School at our school, and I'll go into Magic School and say, I need 20 questions about daily life for students at the ACTFL Intermediate 4 level. And it will generate questions. And maybe half of them will be good, maybe definitely not all of them, but with a few tweaks, I've ended up with 10 questions or eight to 10 questions that I can use with my students that are different. Whereas before, I used to, spend the time myself developing the questions. Allison and I have brainstormed back in 2017 when we first started doing this. We would brainstorm questions to ask the kids for practice, but AI has made that a little easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely has.
So here's an example for level 3. And in this case, our students watch a series called Silvana Sin Lana, but any video where there's an exchange will work in a situation like this. But what we have is we'll give them a specific scene from the series, and we'll ask partner A to explain what happened in the scene, and with as many details about the characters, what they're doing, and why they're doing it. And we usually expect them to speak for 25 seconds, if not more. If they really get into the scene, they will. If the scene is controversial in any way, they'll want to speak more. Then partner B will share their opinion about the scene, and they'll give an opinion about the scene, or like why that character was right to say that, or right to do that, or not. And we help them in the beginning, especially by helping them see that they can start the exchange by saying, I think that Majo shouldn't have spoken to Silvana that way because, and then given a reason. And that helps them expand their it helps them give their opinions about what happens. And if we pick the scenes correctly, if we pick the right scenes, they'll also be engaged in this conversation. And what I love to see when we've done this is that it can get loud, because they'll in the beginning, when we do these types of exchanges, they'll be very constrained. They're just trying to get, their point across. But then when they relax and they're more comfortable, they will, it will be more of a natural back and forth discussing the series. This is a 3-part exchange. So partner A explains what they see with as many details. Partner B gives an opinion and it says why. And then partner A responds with again with a rejoinder to agree or disagree with their partner's opinion and why. So that's something that I continue to use, honestly, in AP. We watch a series called Gran Hotel. If some of you have watched it, it's a series from Spain. And what we'll do is we'll have like a movie talk. We'll talk about the different characters and their motivations and the different scenes and what are they doing there. And I want this to be more of a I asked them to make this more of like a book talk, like you're getting together with your friends talking about a show, so that it's more natural. But we start this as we can start this in level 3.
And I just want to say as well that you could do this with this format of speaking with anything that your students have opinions about, that you've noticed that is controversial, that they could argue about, or just little videos. There's so many things that are online now that don't have to be long series of things that cause conversation or opinions. Right.
And they could be, they could have a conversation. We are in the South, and college football is very important. And, with some of the boys, we can have a conversation about whether a coach should have left or not, or should have abandoned his team or not. And they'll, the problem there is that they'll want to speak quickly, and they'll want to speak in English to get their point across. And it's reining them in and getting them to express themselves in the target language that can be challenging, but it's also where that passion comes in. So here's another example from level 3. They do a series on the world of work there, and they do an activity where student A receives both students receive a career. They get a card with a career on it. And partner A has to describe the job for 25 seconds and include details about what the person does, where they work, and any previous experience and education that they need. Then partner B, and here they use the present tense, they need to share their opinion about that career path. And they, will want to, sometimes they'll say, they'll want to say, yo no pienso, I don't think I want to be that, or that's not, I have never wanted to be that specific profession. Then partner A will use a rejoinder, again, to agree or disagree with their partner's opinion and share their own opinion without repeating what the other person said. And they switch roles. Then partner B starts the conversation. So general tips. We start incorporating this process early in the school year to see progress, and so students feel comfortable doing it. So they don't think twice about going into pairs and having a conversation or practicing. We return to this process throughout the year and subsequent units in any way we can. And each time we incorporate and model more complex questions, not only about what students read or watch in class, but also about their lives and opinions, a favorite show that's out there. If there was one, what was, Allison, that beach show you asked me to watch? The one about, that's in the North Carolina.
Now I can't.
Well, anyway,
it's coming back. Anyway, yeah, there's a new season of it.
Yes, there is. And so it was a show that was very popular and among teenagers. The other one that we talked about was earlier in the year in my AP class. We talked about The Summer I Turned Pretty, and and what they thought about the different characters, what they wanted, what they thought about the different characters and how they were reacting and who their favorite was. And they're just natural conversations, and getting them to have them in the target language is encourage them to use it to express their ideas. It builds confidence. It's informal in those situations, not as structured, but then we follow up with a more structured conversation, and each time the students improve. But we incorporate and model more complex questions, like I said, and whenever we can, we add information about their lives and opinions, because they love to tell us what they think. So that's what we have for you today. Thank you for being with us. And if you have any questions, we'd love to. Outer Banks, thank you so much. Yeah. That's it. Yes. One of my students actually saw the boy in Outer Banks at a restaurant, and she went up to ask him for an autograph, and he shooed her away. So he was rude to her. I see a question. Do you feel the feedback you provide your students ultimately parallels with the scores they receive on the AAPPL test? After 2 years, I'm not seeing consistent scores with similar answers.
I'm not sure what I'm not sure if, when it's a performance for proficiency test. So just because they're able to do it in one context with us, answer one question, doesn't mean that they can transfer it to another context in the same way. It may be more challenging for them. So I've seen that the advice that we give them as far as the elements that they need to try to include, that is consistent, and that is what the proficiency-based tests are looking for. And I got those ideas from an LTI webinar and from the Global Seal as well, about the different clauses and trying to use different details and things like that. And those definitely are consistent. But it's difficult to say. We've had trouble too, where, we give students grades for how they're able to answer the questions that we give them, because we know that what they can and can't do with us. But as far as it transferring to what they're going to receive on a performance for proficiency test, we try to stay away from telling them, this is what you're going to get because you made this on this test. And that has been, we try to be very careful with that, because students have been confused with that in the past. And so yeah, that's my answer. What do you think, Jesse?
Well, I also think that what I like to look at is a pattern. If the student in the practices, if the student is leaving out, like recently I had a student who was leaving out details. He leaves them out in English. He doesn't tell a story.
We definitely see a parallel in the way they communicate in English and how they do in Spanish most of the time.
And so when I worked with a student, one-on-one, and I started out by asking him to tell me a story in English and add details. And then, I pointed out to him, then I had him listen to another student with that student's permission, so he could see how the other student had incorporated details, and he improved. But his natural tendency is not to include those details. The other thing that I've noticed is that sometimes they'll go off topic. So if the question is, tell me a story about a time when you got in trouble for your phone, they'll say, oh, one time I got in trouble with my phone in math class, and it was my new phone. And, I really like my new phone because it's it can do so much more than my old phone can do. And so now the conversation, they're producing, they're talking, but they're not answering the question.
Yeah, Jesse, I
Uh,
want to piggyback on that because that is one of the aspects of the rubric that is used to score the Apple production, includes the context and content. So we're not just looking at accuracy and text type,
Mhm.
but also is this responding to the actual prompt? That's a big part
Correct.
of it. And you can always view your students' writing or listen to their speaking, their recordings in your client site for 60 days so that you can make a determination whether you'd like to request a re-rating, for example.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes, yes, we have done that. We have found that extremely helpful to figure out, although we can't hear the question, so we don't know if they answered the question or not, we can tell if they're using those aspects that we've asked them to try to incorporate.
Right.
Well, we have time for one more question. So if anybody wants to place a question in the chat, and you can see here the contact information for both Jesse and Allison if you'd like to reach out and learn more.
Well, thank you so much,
Thank
everyone,
you.
for being with us this afternoon and listening to how we do things. And if you have something to add to the presentation, if there's something that you do that you'd love to share with us, please contact us. We're always looking for new ideas,
Yeah.
and we're constantly working on that.
Yeah.
I want to thank you both. I was amazed at a lot of the strategies. I hadn't done some of those things with my upper level learners, and I think that a lot of the other folks too took away some strategies they can put in place tomorrow in their
I
classroom.
hope so.
Right.
Mhm.
With their own materials.
Exactly. Just finding engaging topics. It sounds like
Mhm.
that's the first step. So thank
And
you.
I'll send you one of the pictures of my La Llorona outfit, but please do not turn me in for harassment. Don't block me.
Well, thank you for your time and thank you everyone for
Thank
joining us
you.
today.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.